The USS Enterprise-D Cetacean Ops existed 4 decks below main engineering, a vast aquatic environment where few humanoid crew members ventured. Water, the temperature of Earth's temperate seas, filled chambers designed for beings who navigated the stars through methods human science barely understood. Lieutenant Commanders Chaffin and Manatee, 2 bottlenose dolphins whose neural patterns interfaced directly with the ship's navigational sensors, were conducting routine subspace mapping when their pool erupted. The rift tore through dimensions with a sound like tearing silk, amplified 1,000 times. Water displaced violently as a figure materialized mid-tank, plummeting through liquid that suddenly connected to an ocean 700 light-years and several dimensional barriers away. Sensors throughout Cetacean Ops screamed warnings. Emergency bulkheads began descending. And then the Dolphins felt it, a presence in the water unlike anything Federation science had cataloged. Arthur Curry, king of Atlantis, breached the surface of an impossible pool, gasping not from lack of air but from the sheer dislocation of reality. One moment, he'd been investigating a subspace anomaly in the Mariana Trench, trident extended, probing energies that made Atlantean scientists nervous. The next, he was treading water in a chamber that smelled wrong, recycled, sterile, artificial, while creatures he'd spent his life defending circled him with what his senses translated as curiosity, professional assessment. His telepathic gift, refined through decades of communion with every creature that swam Earth's seas, reached out instinctively. What he received back made him forget to breathe. Unidentified biological entity in Cetacean Ops, the thought patterns came crisp, clear, and structured with military precision. Recommend containment protocols pending security clearance. Neural signature suggests telepathic capacity. Fascinating. The Dolphins weren't calling for help. They were filing a report. What is this place? Arthur's voice echoed off bulkheads constructed from materials his Atlantean engineering knowledge couldn't identify. The water tasted of Earth's oceans, but was processed, balanced, and maintained by technology rather than natural cycles. "You speak surface language," came Lieutenant Commander Chaffin's thoughts, now directed at him with the focused intensity of a trained communicator. Universal translator compensating for neurolinguistic patterns. "Sir, you've manifested in a restricted Starfleet facility. Please remain calm while we notify command." Arthur's hand tightened on his trident, Poseidon's gift, forged in Atlantean magic and tempered in the blood of ancient wars. Its golden surface gleamed under lighting that mimicked sunlight penetrating shallow seas. "Starfleet, I don't know that nation. What kingdom claims these waters?" The Dolphins exchanged what Arthur's senses interpreted as the aquatic equivalent of a significant glance. "Not a kingdom, sir. The United Federation of Planets. You're aboard the USS Enterprise, Galaxy-class starship, currently in Sector 221G, conducting deep space exploration. And you're approximately 700 light-years from Earth." The words made no sense. 700 light-years. Starship. Arthur pulled himself to the tank's edge, muscles adapted for crushing ocean pressure making the movement effortless despite the strange artificial gravity that pulled differently than Earth's seas. His orange and green-scaled armor dripped water that the ship's systems were already analyzing, cataloging, comparing against every known biological database in Federation records. On the bridge, 4 decks above, Captain Jean-Luc Picard received the alert with the calm of a man who'd encountered enough impossible situations to develop philosophical patience. "Mr. Data, report." The android's fingers danced across his console with inhuman precision. "Captain, sensors detected a subspace aperture in Cetacean Ops at 1347 hours. A humanoid life form materialized directly into the aquatic environment. Biosigns indicate a human baseline with significant genetic modifications, increased bone density, enhanced musculature, gill-like respiratory structures, and neural patterns suggesting telepathic capability. The Cetacean crew has established preliminary communication." "Counselor," Picard turned to Deanna Troi, whose empathic senses already reached toward the presence 4 decks below. Confusion, Captain, but also authority, strength, and a profound connection to something I can't quite identify. It's like standing beside the ocean itself. Troy's dark eyes widened slightly. He's a protector. Whatever he is, he spent his life defending something precious. Mr. Worf, security status. The Klingon security chief growled low in his throat, fingers hovering over tactical controls. The intruder is armed, Captain. Some form of energy-based melee weapon. Power readings are inconsistent with known technology. I recommend a security team. Belay that, Mr. Worf. If our Cetacean officers have established communication, let's extend the courtesy of first contact protocols. Picard stood, tugging his uniform into place with the unconscious gesture that always preceded diplomatic challenges. Commander Riker, you're with me. Data, Counselor, you as well. Let's meet our unexpected guest properly. In Cetacean Ops, Arthur had pulled himself fully from the tank, water cascading off his form as he stood on decking that thrummed with power. The chamber extended far larger than he'd initially realized. Interconnected pools, monitoring stations with displays showing star charts he couldn't begin to interpret, and technology that made even Atlantis's most advanced systems look primitive. Through transparent aluminum viewing ports, he glimpsed what his mind refused to accept: the infinite black of space, stars that didn't twinkle because there was no atmosphere to distort their light. Poseidon's beard, he whispered. The doors, some kind of sliding panel that opened with a pneumatic hiss, admitted 4 individuals. Arthur's warrior instincts cataloged them instantly. The older human leading with diplomatic bearing, the tall bearded human with commander's confidence, a pale-skinned man whose movements were too precise to be entirely human, and a woman whose eyes held depths that spoke of perception beyond the physical. I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation starship Enterprise. The older man's voice carried the weight of authority without aggression, diplomacy refined into an art form. On behalf of the United Federation of Planets, I welcome you aboard, though I confess this is among the more unusual first contact scenarios I've encountered. You are, Arthur straightened, and though he stood in an alien vessel surrounded by technology beyond his understanding, he was still a king. Arthur Curry, son of Atlanta. King of Atlantis and the 7 seas. I was investigating an anomaly in Earth's Pacific Ocean when he gestured helplessly at the impossible chamber. Your creatures say I'm in space. That can't be possible. I assure you, Your Majesty, it is quite possible. Data stepped forward, his golden eyes reflecting light with an uncanny quality. You appear to have been transported through a subspace rift, a temporary connection between 2 points in spacetime. The Enterprise's navigation systems utilize Cetacean officers whose cognitive patterns allow for calculations beyond standard humanoid capabilities. You materialize directly into their operational environment. Cetacean officers. Arthur's gaze snapped back to the pools where Chaffin and Manatee observed with intelligent, patient focus. You mean the Dolphins serve on this vessel? By choice? Of course, by choice. Picard's tone suggested the question bordered on offensive. Lieutenant Commanders Chaffin and Manatee are valued members of this crew, having graduated from Starfleet Academy with honors. Their contributions to navigation and spatial analysis are invaluable. Surely on Earth, your Earth, the integration of Cetacean intelligence into society is established. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Arthur felt the weight of revelation settling over him like the pressure at the deepest ocean trenches. These people, these future humans, if that's what they were, had done what Atlantis had always claimed to do, truly partnered with the ocean's children. Not ruled them, not spoken for them, but served alongside them as equals. On my Earth, Arthur said slowly, the surface world hunts whales to near extinction. They fill the seas with poison and plastic. Dolphins are curiosities in tanks for entertainment. Only Atlantis, my kingdom, protects them. Only we understand their people. The horror on Picard's face was genuine. Troy's empathic gasp was audible. Even Worf, the Klingon warrior observing from the doorway, looked disturbed. "Then, Your Majesty," Picard said with quiet intensity, "you and I have much to discuss about the future, and perhaps about what your world might become. But first, let's address your immediate situation. You're trapped far from home aboard a vessel you don't understand, in a universe that may not be your own. The Federation's priority is to help you return, if that's what you wish. But I suspect," he glanced at the Dolphins observing with keen interest, "that you've just discovered something worth understanding before you go." Arthur looked at Lieutenant Commander Chaffin, whose mind still touched his with the clarity of a fellow officer awaiting orders, and realized with creeping wonder that everything he'd fought for already existed here. The question was whether a king could learn from a future where the ocean had already won its freedom. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below, to boldly go where no one has gone before. The Enterprise's main conference lounge offered a view that Arthur Curry would remember for the rest of his life. Space in its infinite, humbling glory stretching beyond transparent aluminum viewports. He sat at the polished table, feeling profoundly out of place despite Picard's diplomatic courtesy. His scaled armor, designed to withstand the crushing depths of the Challenger deep, seemed absurdly primitive against the clean lines of 24th century technology. The Trident leaned against his chair, its mystical energies causing the ship's sensors, Data had explained, considerable analytical confusion. "Your weapon's energy signature is unlike anything in our database," Data said, studying his tricorder with the focused intensity Arthur recognized from Atlantean scholars. "It reads simultaneously as coherent energy, quantum flux, and something our sensors interpret as probability manipulation. Fascinating. May I ask its origin?" "Forged by Poseidon, or what my people believe was Poseidon millennia ago." Arthur ran a hand along the golden shaft, feeling its familiar thrum. "Atlantean magic, though your science would probably call it something else. It channels the ocean's power, responds to Atlantean royal bloodline, can command water itself, create whirlpools, communicate across vast distances through sea currents. Magic and technology are often indistinguishable," Picard observed, sipping his tea with characteristic elegance. "Arthur C. Clarke's third law. What you call magic, we might explain through quantum mechanics and dimensional energy manipulation. The universe is considerably stranger than most civilizations initially suppose." "Speaking of strange," Commander Riker leaned forward, his casual posture belying sharp intelligence, "how exactly do you communicate with cetaceans? Our universal translator picks up structured thought patterns, but the method seems biological rather than technological." Arthur felt the familiar tingle of his telepathic sense, a gift inherited from his Atlantean mother that had defined his entire existence. "It's innate. I feel what sea creatures feel, think what they think. Every shark, every whale, every dolphin, we share consciousness when I reach out. I can command them if necessary, though I try not to. It's," he searched for words, "like being part of a vast network of minds, all connected through water itself." Troy straightened in her chair, her empathic senses clearly resonating with his explanation. "That's remarkably similar to Betazoid telepathy, though focused on non-humanoid species. Captain, this could explain why Lieutenant Commanders Chaffin and Manatee reported such clear communication despite the universal translator's initial difficulty. He was speaking directly to their minds." "Which presents an interesting situation." Picard steepled his fingers in his characteristic gesture of thoughtful consideration. "Your Majesty, our Cetacean officers are Starfleet personnel with rank, autonomy, and legal protections under Federation law. Your telepathic ability, however well-intentioned, could be perceived as a violation of their mental privacy. I need to ask, can you control this ability, or is it constant?" The question hit Arthur like a physical blow. In all his years as Atlantis's king, as the Justice League's aquatic champion, No one had ever suggested his gift might be intrusive. The ocean's children were his responsibility, his subjects, his to protect and command when surface world threats required coordinated defense. "I can dampen it," he said slowly, awareness dawning uncomfortably. "But they're dolphins. They need guidance, protection. The surface world would destroy them without." "Without what?" Worf's gravelly voice cut through from his position near the door. "Without a king to speak for them. Lieutenant Commander Chaffin holds advanced degrees in astrophysics and navigation. She has commanded away missions. She earned her rank through merit and examination, same as any officer. She does not require your protection." The Klingon's words, though harsh, held no malice, just the blunt honesty of a warrior stating observable fact. Data's head tilted with the curious gesture that Arthur was learning, meant the android was processing complex social dynamics. "I believe there is a fundamental cultural disconnect, Captain. In Mr. Curry's universe, cetaceans apparently lack the technological integration and linguistic capacity to participate equally in civilization. His telepathy serves as a bridge and an advocacy. Here, however, universal translators, neural interfaces, and 2 centuries of Federation policy have made such advocacy unnecessary. The cetaceans speak for themselves." 2 centuries, Arthur's voice came hoarse. "You've had dolphins in your space fleet for 200 years. "Since 2180, Picard confirmed. "Captain Ramirez of the USS Pioneer first proposed cetacean integration after discovering that humpback whales could perceive subspace variations humans couldn't detect. The philosophical debates were extensive. Questions of exploitation, of whether we were simply using another species for our benefit. But the cetaceans themselves advocated for participation. They wanted to explore the stars as much as humanity did. Today, Cetacean Ops exists on most Starfleet vessels. They're not crew members serving under us, Your Majesty. They're colleagues serving beside us." Arthur stood abruptly, needing to move, to process information that fundamentally challenged everything he'd built his identity around. He approached the viewport, staring at stars that shouldn't exist, in a future that couldn't be real. Behind him, he felt Troy's empathic attention, gentle but present. "On my world," he said quietly, "I'm the only voice they have. Surface nations don't recognize Atlantis' sovereignty. They certainly don't recognize dolphins as people. I've spent decades fighting whalers, preventing oil spills, and trying to make humans understand that the ocean's children matter. And you're telling me there's a future where I'm unnecessary." "Not unnecessary," Picard rose, moving to stand beside him. "Perhaps simply operating in a context where the battle you've been fighting has already been won. Tell me, when you return to your time, your universe, wouldn't you want this future for them? A world where cetaceans don't need a king's protection because they possess their own voices, their own power, their own choices." Before Arthur could answer, the comm system chirped. "Bridge to Captain Picard. Picard here." "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Starfleet Command." The voice belonged to the officer Arthur hadn't met yet, Wesley Crusher, the young ensign whose role he didn't quite understand. "Admiral Nakamura needs to speak with you immediately. It concerns the subspace rift that brought our guest aboard. And Captain, a Romulan warbird is decloaking off our starboard bow." The conference room transformed instantly. Picard was moving before the words fully registered, Riker behind him, Worf's hand already on his phaser. Data's fingers flew across the wall panel, bringing up tactical displays that showed the Enterprise surrounded by green vectors Arthur instinctively recognized as hostile despite his ignorance of the technology. "Red alert," Picard ordered, his voice carrying command authority that reminded Arthur of Atlantean war councils. "All hands to battle stations. Mr. Data, what's our status?" "The Romulan vessel is the IRW Valdor, warbird class, matching our course and speed. They are hailing us, Captain. Audio only." "On-screen audio," Picard corrected himself. The voice that emerged from the speakers carried the cold precision Arthur associated with surface politicians who viewed the ocean as a resource rather than a realm. Captain Picard, how convenient to find you here, so close to the neutral zone, at precisely the moment a subspace rift opens in Federation space. The Romulan Star Empire has detected unusual energy signatures consistent with dimensional breaches. We demand an explanation. Arthur felt Picard's tension, saw the captain's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Whatever history existed between these powers, it wasn't friendly. Commander Tomalak, Picard's voice remained diplomatic but firm. The rift was naturally occurring and has since collapsed. The Enterprise is conducting standard exploration operations within Federation territory. Your presence here on our side of the neutral zone is the concerning element. Naturally occurring. The Romulan skepticism dripped like poison. How interesting that this natural phenomenon deposited a humanoid life form with telepathic capabilities directly onto your vessel. A life form whose neural signature our long-range sensors detect even through your shields. The Tal Shire has considerable interest in telepathic species, Captain, especially those with abilities we haven't yet cataloged. Arthur's hand moved instinctively to his trident. Whoever these Romulans were, they spoke of him like a specimen to be studied, claimed, controlled. He'd heard that tone before, from surface governments that wanted to weaponize Atlantean technology, from mercenaries who thought capturing the Sea King would grant them leverage over the oceans. Troy's voice came soft but urgent. Captain, I'm sensing multiple minds on that ship focused specifically on Arthur. Predatory interest, scientific curiosity mixed with military calculation. They see him as an asset to be acquired. Your Majesty, Picard turned to Arthur, and in his eyes was a question that transcended species and dimensions. The Federation will not surrender you to the Romulans under any circumstances. You have asylum aboard this vessel for as long as you require it. But I need to understand what we're protecting. Your telepathic range, how far does it extend? In Earth's oceans, thousands of miles if I really push it, I can coordinate whale migrations across entire ocean basins, command shark populations, call every dolphin in the Pacific if necessary. Arthur met Picard's gaze steadily. Why? Data's console beeped with new information. Captain, I may have discovered why the Romulans are so interested. According to recent intelligence reports, the Romulan colony world of Glintara Prime possesses extensive ocean coverage, approximately 87%. Long-range surveys have detected cetacean-level intelligence in those waters, but the Romulans have been unable to establish communication. If they believe Mr. Curry's abilities could let them speak to their own dolphins, Riker finished grimly. Control them, use them. Tomalak isn't here by coincidence, Captain. The Tal Shire knew about that rift before we did. Arthur's fingers tightened on the trident until his knuckles whitened. You're saying these Romulans want to use me to enslave intelligent ocean life on their worlds? The Romulans do not view other species as equals, Worf stated flatly. They view them as resources. If you can command cetaceans, they will attempt to extract that knowledge, by force if necessary. The conference room fell silent except for the gentle hum of the Enterprise's systems and the distant pulse of red alert warnings. Arthur looked at each face around the table. Picard's diplomatic resolve, Riker's protective readiness, Data's analytical assessment, Troy's empathic concern, Worf's warrior preparedness. These people, these future humans and their allies, were offering to stand between him and an empire that wanted to weaponize his gift. On his Earth, surface governments feared him. Even the Justice League sometimes seemed uncomfortable with the scope of his powers, with his control over 70% of the planet's surface. Here, strangers offered sanctuary against those who would exploit what made him different. Captain Picard, Arthur said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of royal decision. In my world, I protect the ocean because no one else will, but I'm starting to understand that protection can take many forms. Tell me what you need. Picard's slight smile held approval and something deeper, the recognition of character revealed under pressure. I need to know if you're willing to help us understand what the Romulans are so desperate to acquire, and more immediately, I need to diplomatically deflect Commander Tomalak before this situation escalates into an interstellar incident. Or, Worf added with a warrior's pragmatism, prepare for combat. Through the viewport, Arthur could see the Romulan vessel now, a predatory thing painted in aggressive greens, weapons clearly visible even to his untrained eye. It reminded him of surface warships that occasionally violated Atlantean waters, all threat and hunger. The difference was that this time, he wasn't alone in the depths. The bridge of the Enterprise hummed with controlled tension as Arthur Curry stepped onto the command deck for the first time. The space overwhelmed his senses, a cathedral of technology where officers moved with practiced precision, their stations alive with displays showing information he couldn't begin to interpret. The main view screen dominated his attention. The Romulan warbird hung in space like a predator, its angular wings spread in a configuration that suggested both elegance and menace. Commander Tomalak, Picard stood before his captain's chair with the bearing of a diplomat who'd negotiated peace through countless crises. I've explained our situation. The humanoid who arrived through the rift is under Federation protection as per first contact protocols. Your interest in him is noted but irrelevant to his sovereign rights. The Romulan face that appeared on the view screen carried aristocratic features hardened by military pragmatism. Tomalak's expression balanced between amusement and calculation. Sovereign rights, Captain. How generous of the Federation to grant rights to someone who materialized uninvited in your space. But the Tal Shire's intelligence suggests this individual possesses capabilities that could prove strategically significant, particularly to worlds with predominantly aquatic environments. Arthur felt every eye on the bridge turn briefly toward him. He stood near the tactical station where Worf monitored the Romulan vessel with predatory focus, his trident held loosely but ready. The weapon's energy signatures were still causing Data's science station considerable confusion. The android kept glancing at his readings, with the frustrated fascination of someone encountering phenomena that defied logical categorization. Captain, Data spoke quietly, his fingers dancing across his console. I am detecting subspace transmissions from the warbird. They are scanning specifically for neural patterns consistent with Mr. Curry's telepathic signature. Additionally, there is a second transmission, encoded, directed toward the neutral zone. I believe Commander Tomalak is not acting alone. Picard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Tomalak, are you aware that scanning a Federation vessel's crew without permission violates our treaty agreements? I'm trying to resolve this diplomatically, but you're testing my patience. Patience? Tomalak's smile held no warmth. Captain, my government's patience is the issue. The Romulan Star Empire has recently established a colony on Glintara Prime, a world whose oceans contain species of remarkable intelligence. Species we have been unable to communicate with despite considerable effort. Then, conveniently, a being appears in Federation space who claims telepathic communion with aquatic life across thousands of miles. You'll forgive the Tal Shire's professional interest. Arthur stepped forward before Picard could respond, his warrior instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. You want to use me to control intelligent beings, to turn them into tools for your empire. I've spent my entire life fighting that kind of exploitation. Tomalak's attention fixed on him with unsettling intensity. Ah, the specimen speaks. Tell me, do you command the creatures of your seas, or do you merely communicate? The distinction matters significantly to the Star Empire's xenobiological research programs. He is not a specimen. Picard's voice carried steel beneath diplomatic courtesy. He is Arthur Curry, King of Atlantis, and while aboard this vessel, he is afforded every protection Federation law provides. This conversation is over, Commander. The Enterprise is returning to its original course. I suggest you do the same before this situation requires involvement from Starfleet Command and your own government. Actually, Captain, Tomilak's smile widened with genuine pleasure. That won't be necessary. You see, while we've been talking, the IRW Davidices has taken position on your port side, and the IRW Terramura guards your aft. 3 warbirds, Captain Picard. Just to ensure our interests are properly represented. The tactical display erupted with new vectors. Arthur didn't need military training to understand the situation. They were surrounded. Evasive maneuvers, Riker ordered from his position beside Picard, his casual demeanor replaced by command authority. Take us to yellow alert, shields at maximum. Worf's deep growl carried satisfaction at finally having clear action parameters. 3 warbirds, Captain. They are powering weapons but have not achieved target lock. Recommend we. The Enterprise shuddered violently. Arthur grabbed the tactical rail to steady himself, his enhanced physiology absorbing the impact that sent other crew members staggering. Warning klaxons shrieked across the bridge. The viewscreen showed energy discharge where the lead warbird had fired, not at the Enterprise but near it. Warning shot, Data reported with clinical precision. Disruptor fire, low yield, calculated to miss by 0.37 meters. A demonstration, Captain. Captain Picard, Tomilak's voice carried mock concern. It seems one of my weapons officers experienced a targeting malfunction. These things happen near dimensional anomalies, don't they? Such unpredictable energy signatures can interfere with delicate systems. Perhaps if you beamed your guest to my vessel for safekeeping, we could avoid further malfunctions. Arthur felt rage building, the same fury that surfaced when surface nations violated Atlantean waters, when whalers ignored his warnings, when humanity's arrogance demanded response. The trident thrummed in his grip, responding to his emotional state. Water vapor in the air around him began to vibrate. Arthur, Troy's voice cut through his anger with empathic precision. Your emotional state is affecting the ship's environmental systems. The humidity on this deck just increased by 17%. Please, you need to control. They're threatening your ship because of me. Arthur's voice came rough with barely contained power. These Romulans want to enslave intelligent beings the same way surface nations hunt whales. I won't let that happen. Not here. Not anywhere. Picard turned to face him, and in the captain's eyes Arthur saw something unexpected. Not fear of his power, but concern for his well-being. Your Majesty, I understand your anger, but aboard this vessel, we handle threats through established protocols. We don't escalate to violence when diplomatic solutions remain viable. Diplomatic solutions. Arthur gestured at the viewscreen where 3 warships held them at gunpoint. They just fired on you. A warning shot, Picard corrected calmly. Tomilak is testing our resolve, attempting to provoke a response that would justify further aggression. It's a game I've played with him before. If we return fire, he wins. The Romulans can claim Federation aggression. If we retreat, he wins, we appear weak, and the Tal Shire gains momentum for future operations. So we don't play his game at all. Data's console emitted urgent alerts. Captain, sensors are detecting additional vessels approaching through the neutral zone. 2 more warbirds and a Romulan science vessel. ETA 4 minutes. 5 warbirds and a science ship. The tactical implications were clear even to Arthur. Overwhelming force combined with the capability to study him thoroughly. The Romulans weren't bluffing. They intended to take him, study his abilities, and use that knowledge to control aquatic intelligences across their empire. Captain, Worf's voice carried unusual tension for the Klingon warrior. At these numbers, even the Enterprise cannot. Incoming transmission, Wesley Crusher interrupted from Khan. Captain, it's from Cetacean Ops. Lieutenant Commander Chaffin is requesting permission to speak with you. She says it's urgent and concerns Mr. Curry directly. Picard's eyebrows rose fractionally, on speakers. The thought patterns that emerged, translated through the universal translator but retaining the distinctive cognitive style Arthur had felt in the tank, carried crystalline certainty. Captain Picard, Lieutenant Commander Chaffin reporting. Commander Manatee and I have been monitoring the situation through our neural interface with the ship's sensors. We have a recommendation regarding the Romulan crisis. I'm listening, Commander. The Romulans want Mr. Curry because they believe he can establish communication with the Cetaceans of Glintara Prime. What they don't understand is that Cetacean communication requires mutual consent and cultural context. Mr. Curry's abilities facilitate connection, but they don't enable control, not with truly intelligent species. The Glintara Cetaceans have likely been avoiding Romulan contact deliberately. Arthur felt his assumptions shifting like tectonic plates. You're saying the Dolphins on their world are choosing not to talk to them? Precisely, Your Majesty. Just as Starfleet's integration of Cetacean officers required decades of cultural negotiation and mutual respect, any meaningful communication requires both parties to be willing to engage. The Romulans approach aquatic intelligence as a resource to exploit. Why would any self-aware species cooperate with that? Tomalak's voice cut through, having apparently monitored the exchange. How fascinating. The fish have opinions about interstellar diplomacy. Captain, this changes nothing. We will acquire the telepath, one way or another. You call them fish, Arthur's voice carried quiet fury, the way surface nations call dolphins swimming meat. That's why they won't talk to you. Not because they can't, because they won't. The connection Chaffin had articulated crystallized in Arthur's mind with startling clarity. He'd spent decades assuming his role as the ocean's champion meant speaking for creatures who couldn't speak for themselves. But aboard the Enterprise, the Cetaceans spoke perfectly well. They'd earned ranks, commanded missions, contributed to Federation exploration as equals. What if Glintara's Dolphins were doing the same thing, exercising their right to refuse communication with oppressors? Captain Picard, Arthur said slowly, formulating a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. What if I contacted the Glintara Cetaceans? Not to help the Romulans, to warn them. The bridge fell silent except for the background hum of systems and the subtle breathing of organic crew. Picard studied Arthur with the intensity of a commander assessing unprecedented variables. Explain. My telepathy works across vast distances through water. If Glintara is mostly ocean, and if intelligent cetaceans inhabit those seas, I could reach out to them. Tell them what the Romulans plan. Give them information to make informed choices about their future. Arthur's grip on the trident tightened. It's what I'd want if I were them. Someone to tell me the truth about the threat I faced. Data's head tilted in his characteristic gesture of processing complex information. Captain, the concept has merit. If Mr. Curry establishes contact with the Glintara Cetaceans, and if those beings choose to formally reject Romulan communication, it would establish precedent under Federation First Contact protocols. The Romulans would be legally obligated to respect the Cetacean sovereignty. You're suggesting, Riker said slowly, that we turn this into a first contact scenario. Not between the Romulans and their local marine life, but between an interdimensional visitor and a previously non-communicative species. The Romulans would claim interference, Worf observed. It would violate their territorial sovereignty. We would be deliberately undermining their authority on a colony world. Are we obligated to respect sovereignty that exploits non-communicative species? Troy's question carried ethical weight. If the Glintara Cetaceans are truly intelligent, and Lieutenant Commander Chaffin believes they are, don't they deserve the choice to refuse contact with civilization that views them as resources? Picard stood silent for a long moment, the weight of command decisions that could reshape interstellar politics evident in his expression. The Romulan vessels waited, weapons powered, science ship approaching with equipment designed to dissect telepathic abilities down to their quantum foundations. Mr. Curry, Picard finally spoke, if you do this, you'll be making contact with an alien species on behalf of the Federation, potentially against Romulan interests. It could trigger a diplomatic incident, possibly even conflict. The Prime Directive technically applies. These are pre-warp beings we'd be deliberately contacting. But you're not Starfleet, not bound by our regulations. But I am bound by my responsibility to protect ocean life, Arthur countered. On any world, in any universe, if intelligent beings are about to be enslaved by people who see them as tools, I have to act. That's who I am. Captain, Wesley Crusher's young voice carried urgency. The Romulan reinforcements just entered sensor range. 3 minutes until they reach us. Picard looked at Arthur Curry, this warrior king from another dimension who'd stumbled into a future where his life's work had already succeeded, yet found new battles waiting. Then the captain did what he always did when faced with impossible choices. He trusted his principles. Mr. Data, open a channel to Glintara Prime. Route it through Cetacean Ops. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly with Cetacean consultation. Picard's voice carried absolute command authority. Your Majesty, you have permission to attempt contact, but understand, if those beings choose to speak with the Romulans, we respect that choice. If they choose isolation, we defend that right. The goal isn't control, it's informed consent. Arthur nodded slowly. Understanding the profound difference, Picard articulated. Agreed. Take me to Cetacean Ops. If I'm going to speak for the ocean, I'd better make sure the ocean approves. As Arthur moved toward the turbolift with Data and Troy as escort, Tomalak's voice echoed across the bridge with cold certainty. Whatever you're planning, Captain, the Tal Shire will not permit interference with Romulan colonial affairs. This is your last warning. Noted, Commander, Picard replied with diplomatic steel. Red alert. All hands to battle stations. This is going to get complicated. Cetacean Ops had transformed into a war room at the bottom of the sea. If that sea happened to be a starship surrounded by hostile vessels in the infinite dark, Arthur descended into the aquatic chamber to find it blazing with activity. Lieutenant Commanders Chaffin and Manatee swam intricate patterns through their pools, their movements synchronized with data streams projected onto transparent displays. Holographic representations of Glintara Prime rotated above the water, a jewel-blue world whose oceans stretched across continents, deeper and vaster than Earth's Pacific. Data worked at a console with inhuman speed, his golden eyes reflecting scrolling information. Mr. Curry, I'm establishing a subspace carrier wave tuned to aquatic neural frequencies. Lieutenant Commander Chaffin has provided baseline patterns from her own cognitive signatures. The system should amplify your telepathic range by a factor of approximately 12,000, allowing you to reach Glintara Prime despite the distance. 12,000. Arthur's mind struggled with the mathematics. That's 7.3 light years, Data supplied helpfully. Under normal circumstances, impossible for biological telepathy. However, your abilities appear to utilize subspace phenomena we don't fully understand. The Enterprise's communication systems can provide the necessary boost, essentially turning the ship into a massive telepathic relay station. Troy stood near the pool's edge, her empathic senses extended like invisible fingers, testing the emotional currents. Arthur, before you begin, you need to understand what you're walking into. The Glintara cetaceans have been silent for 3 years, since the Romulans first arrived. That's not an accident, that's a choice. When you reach out, you'll be encountering minds that have deliberately isolated themselves from technological civilization. As Atlantis did, Arthur said quietly, understanding crystallizing. When my mother's people first retreated beneath the waves, they severed contact with the surface world, not because they couldn't communicate, because they chose not to, with a world that had proven itself unworthy of trust. Exactly, Your Majesty. Chaffin's thoughts carried approval and something deeper, professional respect between beings who understood the weight of representing their species. Which means your approach matters enormously. You're not just making contact, you're potentially breaking through isolation born from trauma. The Enterprise shuddered. Even 4 decks down, Arthur felt the impact as weapons fire, Romulan disruptors testing the shields, Picard's voice filtering through the comm system with diplomatic protests that everyone knew were performance rather than expectation of compliance. "We don't have much time." Arthur moved to the pool's edge, staring down into water that suddenly represented a bridge across an impossible distance. "What do I need to know about cetacean communication protocols here? In my world, I just reach out, feel for their presence, but you're telling me there's more to it." Data's fingers paused on his console. In Federation practice, first contact with telepathic species follows established guidelines. You must identify yourself clearly, state your intentions without deception, offer information freely, and, most critically, accept refusal graciously. The beings you contact have the absolute right to decline communication. If they do, Arthur looked at the android, seeing something in those golden eyes that transcended artificial construction, genuine concern for sapient rights. Then the Romulans have no legal claim to forced contact, and Federation law obligates us to defend the Glintara Cetacean's right to isolation, even if it means conflict with the Star Empire. Data's head tilted slightly. "Though I calculate such a conflict has 73% probability of occurring regardless of your success." The ship rocked again, harder this time. Worf's voice came through the comm with barely restrained aggression. "Captain, the warbirds are tightening formation. They're attempting to disable our engines without destroying the ship. Recommendation, we return fire." "Negative, Mr. Worf. Maintain defensive posture only." Picard's command carried the strain of a captain holding impossible lines. "Data, how long until Mr. Curry can attempt contact?" 30 seconds, Captain. The subspace carrier wave is stabilizing." Arthur stripped off his scaled armor's upper section and dove into the pool, the shock of water against his skin like coming home after too long in the dry world. His Atlantean physiology responded instantly, gill slits opening along his ribs, enhanced senses expanding to read currents and pressure with perfect clarity. The trident came with him, its energies causing the water to shimmer with bioluminescent patterns. He surfaced near where Chaffin and Manatee waited, their intelligent eyes watching with the focus of fellow officers embarking on a crucial mission. Through the water, through the strange technology of this impossible future, Arthur felt the amplification building, the Enterprise itself becoming an extension of his consciousness, a vast antenna pointed toward distant seas. "Remember," Chaffin's thoughts carried gentle instruction, "consent is paramount. Even if the Glintara Cetaceans desperately need help, they have the right to refuse it. Your role is to offer choice, not impose salvation." The words struck deeper than Arthur expected. How many times had he assumed the ocean's children needed his protection, his voice, his decisions? How many times had he spoken for them without asking if they wanted to be spoken for? "Initiating subspace carrier wave," Data announced. "Mr. Curry, you may begin when ready. I am detecting your neural patterns interfacing with the ship systems. Fascinating. Your telepathy is achieving quantum entanglement with the communication array." Arthur closed his eyes and reached. The distance collapsed like origami folding through dimensions. His consciousness traveled along subspace corridors the Enterprise's technology carved through reality, riding waves of energy toward a world he'd never seen, to speak with minds he'd never touched. The journey felt eternal and instantaneous, a heartbeat that contained universes. Then he felt them. Thousands of presences, maybe millions, are swimming in seas that put Earth's oceans to shame. These weren't the dolphins and whales he knew. Their neural patterns carried different architecture, evolved under alien stars in response to different evolutionary pressures. But the essential quality remained unmistakable: intelligence, awareness, society, culture. These were people who swam instead of walked, who'd built civilization in depths where sunlight became memory. Arthur shaped his thoughts carefully, remembering Data's protocols, Chaffin's warnings, Picard's principles about consent and dignity. He projected identity and intention with absolute clarity. "I am Arthur Curry, called Aquaman, King of Atlantis. I come from another dimension where I protect ocean life from those who would exploit it. I speak to you now because beings called Romulans plan to use technology to force communication with you, to study you, control you, turn your abilities to their military purposes. You have the right to know this threat. You have the right to choose how to respond. I offer no commands, no demands. Only information and solidarity from one ocean's guardian to another. The response came like a tidal wave of collective consciousness. Not one voice, but thousands speaking in intricate harmony. We know the Romulans. We have watched their machines probe our waters, their devices attempting to decode our language, their weapons testing whether we are a threat or a resource. We chose silence because their intentions rang hollow. They sought to use us as the surface dwellers of your world use dolphins for entertainment and labor. You speak of solidarity. Why should we trust one who calls himself king? Kings rule. We choose not to be ruled. The challenge in those words carried the weight of cultural trauma, of a species that had clearly suffered from hierarchical structures before. Arthur felt Chaffin's attention through the water, felt Troy's empathic monitoring from the deck, felt Data's analytical assessment of the exchange. They were all watching to see if a king could respect equals. Your right to question, Arthur projected with absolute honesty. I've spent my life speaking for ocean creatures who couldn't speak for themselves, but I've just discovered a future where they don't need me to speak, where they have their own voices, their own ranks, their own authority. Lieutenant Commander Chaffin here is a dolphin who outranks most of this starship's crew. She earned that rank through competence, intelligence, and choice. You ask why you should trust a king. You shouldn't. But you can trust that I understand what it means to be dismissed as just animals by those who should know better. The Romulans see you as resources. I see you as colleagues in the business of surviving in a universe that often forgets the ocean matters. The collective consciousness of Glintara's cetaceans rippled with what Arthur's senses interpreted as surprise, consideration, cautious interest. He felt layers to their society, pods that functioned like nations, deep swimmers who served as philosophers, surface hunters who acted as scouts, matriarchs whose neural patterns carried the weight of generational memory. Then one presence separated from the collective, ancient, vast, carrying authority that needed no crown. I am she who remembers the first silence. I speak for the deep councils. You claim the Romulans intend forced communication. We have suspected this. Their machines grow more invasive. Their orbital platforms multiply. We have prepared defenses, acoustic weapons that could shatter their underwater installations, coordinated action that could destroy their colonial infrastructure in a single tide. But we hesitated because we lacked knowledge of the stars, of the powers that move above our seas. You offer information. Provide it, and we will judge whether to break our silence. The Enterprise shook violently. Through his connection with the ship systems, Arthur felt the damage reports flooding the bridge, shields weakening, hull stress increasing, Romulan weapons fire growing more aggressive as their patience ran out. Picard's voice came strained but steady. Mr. Curry, I don't know what you're experiencing, but the Romulans are escalating. We're holding position, but our tactical situation is deteriorating. Arthur made a decision that would have been impossible for the man who'd entered Cetacean Ops that first day, but which felt inevitable now. He asked for help. She who remembers, I speak to you from a starship called Enterprise, surrounded by Romulan vessels that threaten us because I won't help them exploit you. The beings on this ship, including Dolphins who serve as officers, are defending my right to contact you, defending your right to choose communication or isolation. They're risking their lives for principles that say intelligent beings deserve sovereignty regardless of what form they take. If you have weapons, if you have the capability to defend yourselves, the Romulans need to know you're not resources waiting to be claimed. You're a civilization capable of refusing contact and willing to enforce that refusal. The response came with the inevitability of storm tides. Then we will show them. And we will show you, king who questions kingship, that the depths have always had their own power. The Romulans built their colonies on our continental shelves, assuming we were simply clever animals. They are about to learn otherwise. Arthur felt the shift across light years, millions of cetacean minds coordinating with precision that put Earth's militaries to shame. On Glintara Prime, the seas began to move. Tectonic harmonics that cetacean pods had been generating for months suddenly achieved resonance. The Romulan underwater facilities that had been mapping cetacean populations, studying their biology, preparing neural interface technology, all of it built on foundations the cetaceans had been systematically undermining. The structures began to collapse. Not violently, the Glintara cetaceans weren't murderers. They gave the Romulans time to evacuate, time to flee to the surface in emergency pods. But the message was unmistakable. We are not yours to study. These are our seas. We choose isolation. Try to force communication again, and the response will be less gentle. Data's console erupted with incoming transmissions. Captain, sensors are detecting massive seismic activity on Glintara Prime. All Romulan underwater installations are being systematically destroyed by what appears to be coordinated tectonic manipulation. The Romulan colonial government is issuing emergency evacuation orders. There, the android paused, his expression shifting to something approaching wonder. They're fleeing their own colony world. Through the subspace link, Arthur felt she who remembers the first silence address him one final time. Tell your ship's commanders we thank them for the information. Tell your Dolphin colleagues we honor their choice to serve among the stars. Perhaps in time, when we are ready, we will consider such journeys ourselves, but that choice will be ours, made in our time on our terms. As for you, King who is learning, remember this: the ocean's power does not require a champion. It requires respect. Return to your dimension. Teach your surface world that lesson. The depths will manage themselves. The connection severed gently but absolutely. Arthur surfaced in Cetacean Ops, gasping, the weight of what he'd just experienced crushing his chest more effectively than any ocean pressure. Through the water, through tear-blurred vision, he saw Chaffin and Manatee watching him with expressions that transcended species, understanding between those who just witnessed the ocean claim its own destiny. Captain, Data's voice carried unprecedented excitement. The Romulan warbirds are breaking formation. They're receiving orders from their colonial command to stand down. The situation on Glintara Prime has apparently created a sufficient crisis that our confrontation is no longer their priority. Commander Tomalak is hailing. On the bridge above, Picard received the transmission with diplomatic grace that concealed triumphant satisfaction. Captain, it seems your guest's interference has created unfortunate complications for Romulan interests. The Tal Shire will remember this. The Star Empire will remember this. As will the Federation, Commander. And more importantly, as will the cetaceans of Glintara Prime. I believe they've just exercised their right to self-determination under interstellar law. Unless the Romulan government wishes to claim they were attacked by fish. The pause before Tomalak's response carried volumes. This matter is not concluded, Picard. It never is, Tomalak. Safe journey home. The view screen went dark. The Romulan warbirds turned, their predatory grace shifting to retreat as they set course for their suddenly unstable colony. The Enterprise hung in space, shields battered but holding, crew breathing a collective sigh of relief. In Cetacean Ops, Arthur Curry pulled himself from the water and sat heavily on the deck, armor forgotten, trident loose in his grip. Troy approached carefully, her empathic senses reading the emotional earthquake rippling through him. They didn't need me, Arthur said quietly. They never needed me. They just needed someone to tell them the truth so they could make their own choices. That's what protection really means, Chaffin's thoughts carried gentle wisdom. Not speaking for those who can't speak, not making choices for those you deem less capable, but ensuring they have the information and freedom to protect themselves. You didn't save the Glintara cetaceans, Your Majesty. You trusted them to save themselves. Arthur looked up at the dolphin who'd taught a king more about leadership in one crisis than decades of ruling had managed. In my world, that's going to be a hard lesson to learn. Then perhaps, Troy said softly. "It's good you've seen what's possible when you trust the ocean to speak for itself." The observation lounge felt different to Arthur now, less like an alien space and more like a place where impossible conversations happened as routine business. 3 hours had passed since the Romulan withdrawal. 3 hours during which Data and a team of Federation scientists had been analyzing the subspace rift that brought him here, searching for a way to send him home. Through the viewports, stars hung in their infinite patience, and Arthur wondered if the ocean depths of his world felt as vast as the space that surrounded this ship. Picard entered carrying 2 cups of Earl Grey tea, a gesture Arthur had learned represented the captain's preferred method of diplomatic overture. "I thought you might appreciate something warm." Commander Data informs me that Atlantean physiology handles temperature variations better than baseline humans, but preference matters regardless of capability. Arthur accepted the cup, the ceramic warm against his palms. "Thank you. I've been thinking about what She Who Remembers said, about the ocean not needing a champion, just respect. That's going to change everything about how I rule when I get back." "If you get back," Picard corrected gently, settling into the chair across from him. "I want to be honest with you, Arthur. The subspace rift that brought you here was a quantum-level anomaly. Data believes it is connected not just to different points in space, but to different dimensional matrices. Your Earth and ours may be variants in the multiverse, similar but fundamentally distinct. Recreating that connection deliberately is impossible," Arthur finished, reading the truth in Picard's diplomatic hesitation. "I'm trapped here." "Not trapped. Welcomed, if you choose to stay." Picard sipped his tea with characteristic precision. "The Federation has protocols for dimensional refugees. We've encountered individuals displaced from their home realities before. You would be granted full citizenship rights, protected status, and considerable autonomy regarding your future. Though I suspect Starfleet Command would be very interested in recruiting someone with your unique capabilities." Arthur laughed, the sound carrying bitter irony. "Join your space navy. I barely understand how your toilets work, Captain. I'm a king from a civilization that uses magic and talks to fish. What would I do on a starship?" "Learn," Picard said simply. "Grow. Discover what it means to protect ocean life in a universe where that protection takes forms you never imagined. Lieutenant Commanders Chaffin and Manatee have formally requested that you consider joining Cetacean Ops as a liaison officer. They believe your telepathic abilities, combined with your cultural perspective from a less developed Earth, could help bridge communication gaps when the Federation encounters new aquatic species." The offer stunned Arthur into silence. He'd spent his entire life fighting to be taken seriously by surface governments, battling to make humanity understand that the ocean's children deserved respect. Here, Dolphins with military ranks wanted him to work for them. "There's something else," Picard continued, his tone shifting to the careful diplomacy Arthur recognized from negotiations. "The incident at Glintara Prime has created ripples, no pun intended. 3 other Romulan colony worlds with significant aquatic environments are reporting similar underground resistance from cetacean populations. The Tal Shire apparently replicated their approach across multiple planets, assuming aquatic intelligence could be exploited uniformly. They're discovering otherwise. The Dolphins are fighting back." Arthur felt fierce pride swelling in his chest. "Across multiple worlds. And the Federation needs to respond appropriately. These species are pre-warp, technically under prime directive protection now that they've demonstrated sapience, but they're on Romulan-claimed worlds, creating unprecedented legal complexity. The Federation Council is convening an emergency session to address cetacean rights across known space." Picard's gaze held steady. "Your testimony about what happened at Glintara could prove crucial to establishing precedent." Before Arthur could respond, the door chimed. Data entered, his expression, as much as an android possessed expressions, carrying something approximating excitement. "Captain, Mr. Curry, we have successfully mapped the quantum signature of the rift that brought you here. The analysis is illuminating." "Can you send me home?" Arthur asked, surprised by his own ambivalence. Did he want to return to a world where he'd always be alone in his understanding, where the ocean's children would never have the voices he'd witnessed here? Potentially, yes. However, there are complications. Data manipulated a PADD, projecting holographic equations that meant nothing to Arthur but clearly fascinated Picard. The rift was not random. Analysis suggests it was deliberately created by an entity or technology of considerable power. The energy signature matches something in our historical databases, a pattern associated with Q continuum activity. Q. Picard's tone carried the weariness of a man who dealt with omnipotent tricksters too many times. Are you suggesting Q brought Arthur here? I am suggesting the probability exceeds 97%, Captain. Furthermore, reality folded. The observation lounge suddenly contained a fifth presence that had absolutely not been there a moment before. A figure in Starfleet Admiral's uniform, though the impish smile and predatory intelligence in his eyes suggested something far beyond any military authority. Q regarded Arthur with the fascinated attention of a child discovering a new toy. Well, 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 the fish-talker finally figures it out. Q circled Arthur like a shark examining prey, though his tone carried more amusement than malice. I was wondering how long it would take you people to realize this wasn't an accident. Really, Picard, you're getting slow in your old age. Picard's jaw tightened with the patience of a saint dealing with divine nuisance. Q, what have you done? What I always do, Jean-Luc, provide an educational opportunity. Q gestured dramatically at Arthur. I found this one sulking in his little underwater kingdom, feeling sorry for himself because the surface world didn't appreciate his fish-whispering talents. So much potential, wasted on a planet that hadn't figured out the ocean matters. I thought, wouldn't it be fascinating to show him a future where everything he fought for already succeeded? Where dolphins navigate starships and whales compose symphonies, and nobody questions whether aquatic intelligence deserves respect. Arthur stood slowly, trident materializing in his grip through sheer force of will and Atlantean magic. You kidnapped me as some kind of lesson. Kidnapped, please. I relocated you temporarily to expand your provincial little worldview, and look at the results. Q snapped his fingers, and holographic displays erupted around the observation lounge. Scenes from Gluntara Prime showing cetaceans coordinating planetary defense. Images from other worlds where aquatic species were demanding Federation contact, and recordings of emergency Federation Council sessions debating expanded rights for pre-warp marine intelligence. Because of you, because of what you did here, the entire quadrant is reconsidering how it treats ocean life. That's rather more impact than stopping a few whalers, wouldn't you say? Picard moved between Q and Arthur, his captain's instinct to protect overriding diplomatic protocol. Q, if this was another one of your tests. Not a test, Jean-Luc, a gift. Q's expression shifted to something approaching genuine sincerity, which Arthur found more unsettling than his theatrical arrogance. Humanity's potential fascinates me, you know that. But humanity isn't the only species with potential. I wanted to see what would happen if someone who actually cared about ocean life discovered a civilization that had already solved the problems he was fighting. Would he become obsolete? Would he adapt? Would he learn? And, Arthur demanded, his warrior pride stung by being treated as an experimental subject. And you surprised me, Q admitted with something like approval. Most monarchs, confronted with evidence their subjects don't need them, either deny reality or cling to power more desperately. You listened to a dolphin who outranked you, trusted cetaceans on a world you'd never seen to save themselves, and questioned whether being a champion meant speaking for others or ensuring they could speak for themselves. That's growth, Arthur Curry. That's evolution. That's exactly the kind of thinking this universe needs more of. Tra entered the observation lounge, having apparently been summoned by someone, possibly Q himself, given his penchant for dramatic timing. Her empathic senses immediately locked onto the entity with mixed recognition and exasperation. Q, What are you offering him? I sense you didn't manipulate events just to make a philosophical point. So cynical, counselor, but you're right, of course. Q turned back to Arthur, and the omnipotent being's expression became oddly earnest. I'm offering a choice, Fish King. I can send you home right now, snap my fingers, and you're back in your little ocean, fighting the same fights, speaking for creatures who will never have their own voices. You'll remember this as a dream, a vision, something to inspire you but never achieve. Or, Arthur already knew there was an or. Q didn't traffic in simple solutions. Or you stay. Not here specifically. The Enterprise has its own destiny to pursue. But in this universe, this timeline, where the work you've dedicated your life to has already borne fruit and new challenges await, the Federation needs someone who understands what it means to bridge the gap between two worlds, surface and sea, magic and technology, monarchy and democracy. Someone who's learned that protection doesn't mean control. Q's smile held genuine warmth beneath its usual mischief. There are 23 Federation worlds with majority aquatic populations, 12 more in allied territories, and as today proved, the Romulan Empire has serious cetacean relations problems brewing. You could spend lifetimes exploring how different civilizations solve the problems your Earth still struggles with, or you could go home and fight alone. The silence that followed felt heavy as ocean pressure. Arthur looked at Picard, seeing in the captain's eyes the understanding of a man who'd faced similar choices. The weight of responsibility against the pull of growth, the familiar comfort of home against the transformative potential of the unknown. If I stay, Arthur said slowly, what happens to my world, to Atlantis? They'll have no king. My people will think I abandoned them. Q's expression softened with what might actually have been sympathy. Time works differently across dimensional barriers. If you choose to return, I can place you moments after you left. No one will even know you were gone. But if you stay, he paused meaningfully, I can arrange for your Atlantis to receive a message. A vision, perhaps. Their king explains he's found a mission in distant waters, that he'll return when his work is complete, that the ocean's children can protect themselves while he learns how to better serve them. They're resourceful people, your Atlanteans. They'll manage. Captain Picard, Arthur turned to the man who defended him against Romulan aggression, who trusted him to make contact with alien species, who demonstrated what leadership looked like when power served principles rather than ego. What would you do? Picard considered the question with the gravity it deserved. His hands clasped behind his back in the contemplative posture Arthur had learned meant the captain was accessing his philosophical foundations. I believe the measure of any leader is their willingness to let their people grow beyond needing them. If you return to your Earth, you'll continue to be essential, the voice the ocean cannot provide for itself, but you'll also limit what that ocean might become. Here, you've seen evidence that your life's work can succeed, that the beings you protect can achieve their own authority and respect. The question isn't what I would do, Arthur. The question is, what does the ocean need from you now? Arthur closed his eyes, reaching out with his telepathic senses one more time. He felt Chuffun and Manatee in their pools, conducting post-mission analysis with the professionalism of officers who just completed a successful operation. He felt the distant echoes of Gluntara Prime's cetaceans, their triumph and relief resonating through subspace like whale song across vast distances. He felt the potential dozens of worlds, hundreds of species, infinite variations on the theme of ocean intelligence that he'd barely begun to understand. And he felt the truth that She Who Remembers had taught him. The ocean's power doesn't require a champion. It requires respect. He could go home and continue being champion, or he could stay and learn how to teach respect. I'll stay, Arthur said, opening his eyes to meet Q's satisfied expression. But on conditions. First, you let me send a proper message to Atlantis, not your version mine. My people deserve honesty. Second, you don't manipulate my choices here. No more tests, no more lessons, no more treating me like your personal educational project. And third, he turned to Picard, if I'm joining the Federation's mission, I want to do it properly. Starfleet Academy, training, rank earned, not given. If Dolphins can graduate with honors, so can a king. Picard's smile held approval and something deeper, the recognition of character that transcended species and dimensions. Starfleet Academy has never had an Atlantean king in its incoming class. I suspect you'll find the experience humbling and transformative. Perfect, Arthur said with the grin of a man who just accepted the greatest challenge of his life. I could use some humbling. Q clapped his hands together with childish delight. Excellent. Character growth, institutional education, cross-cultural exchange. This is going to be entertaining to watch. Though I should warn you, Jean-Luc, Starfleet Command is going to have opinions about recruiting dimensional refugees with telepathic abilities and magical weapons. Starfleet Command, Picard said dryly, has opinions about everything. We'll manage. Mr. Curry, Arthur, welcome to the Federation. I suspect you're going to help us redefine what it means to boldly go where no one has gone before, including, he gestured at the viewports where stars awaited, the oceans between them. Arthur approached the transparent aluminum, staring out at infinity and thinking of the seas on his homeworld, deep and vast and filled with voices he'd spent his life defending. He'd return someday, when he'd learned enough to teach his world what respect really meant. But for now, the universe had oceans waiting to be discovered, cetacean civilizations waiting to be encountered, and a former king had a future to explore where the tide always rose toward justice. Behind him, Q vanished with his characteristic dramatic flair, leaving reality slightly more stable in his absence. Data resumed his analysis of the rift mechanics with android focus. Troy smiled with empathic approval at Arthur's emotional equilibrium, despite a massive life transition. And Picard stood beside the man from another dimension, two leaders contemplating the infinite potential of seas that swam through stars. Captain, Arthur asked quietly, that thing Q said about humanity's potential, does he really think we can be better than we are? He believes it enough to spend eons testing us, Picard replied, his voice carrying the weight of experience with omnipotent tricksters. The question isn't whether we have potential. The question is whether we're brave enough to pursue it, even when it means leaving behind everything familiar. You've answered that question today, Arthur. The ocean, every ocean on every world, is better for your choice. Through the viewport, a distant nebula glowed with ethereal light, its cosmic clouds shaping patterns that looked almost like waves cresting across an infinite shore. Arthur touched the glass, feeling the faint vibration of the Enterprise's systems, and smiled. The journey from champion to student had just begun, and the stars held seas waiting to teach him their secrets. 3 weeks later, Arthur Curry stood in the turquoise waters of Starfleet Academy's aquatic training facility, surrounded by species he'd never imagined. A Benzite cadet practiced underwater engineering alongside a human equipped with aquashuttle gear. 2 Dolphins, not officers yet, but candidates like him, executed navigation exercises with precision that made his Atlantean combat training look primitive. Above the surface, the San Francisco skyline rose in testament to humanity's potential, and beyond that, the stars beckoned with infinite promise. He'd sent his message to Atlantis through Q's grudgingly provided quantum channel, honest words explaining his mission, his commitment to return, his hope that they'd prove capable of protecting themselves while their king learned how to better serve. Mira would understand. Vulko would manage the council. The ocean's children would speak for themselves, while their champion discovered what it meant when the ocean already had a voice. Lieutenant Commander Chaffin visited weekly, mentoring this strange student who could command seas but struggled with warp theory. Data sent reading lists that would take years to complete. Picard forwarded reports from Glintara Prime, where cetaceans were negotiating directly with Federation diplomats, building alliances on their own terms. The Romulan Empire, meanwhile, faced cetacean uprisings across a dozen worlds, the ocean refusing to be conquered, speaking with authority earned through intelligence rather than granted by kings. Arthur dove deep into the training pool, feeling the water embrace him, and reached out with his telepathic senses. The Academy's Dolphins responded with thoughts sharp as sonar, professional as any officer's report, welcoming as any colleague's greeting. They didn't need him to speak for them. They needed him to learn alongside them, to grow into understanding that protection meant partnership. Somewhere in another dimension, his Earth's oceans waited with voices not yet heard, with potential not yet realized. But here, in this impossible future, Arthur Curry had found his true mission, not to be the ocean's champion, but to witness what the ocean could become when given the chance to speak for itself. And when he returned home, older, wiser, humbled by stars, he would teach his world what the Federation had taught him. The depths had always had their own power. Now, a king was finally learning to trust it.